Here we go. The Future of ZK Rollups panel. I'll let our wonderful moderator introduce everyone and the panel.
Yeah, maybe who better to introduce you guys than yourselves? I think I'm not the most interesting one here. We maybe start left so you can introduce yourself, and then we run to the questions.
Hello. Perfect. I'm Mo. I'm not Raza. Raza is head of growth in a school. I lead protocol research in a school, and I'm filling in. Very excited to be here.
Cool. I'm Matt, co-founder, CEO of Caldera. We are a modular blockchain platform. We're most known for our RAS product, Rollups as a Service. So we help teams like Manta, ApeChain, Kinto, and about 20 more launch their own customizable dedicated rollups on Ethereum.
Hey everyone, I'm Avi. I'm the CEO of Nil Foundation, and we're building an Ethereum layer 2 based on ZK sharding.
Hi, my name is Amrit. I'm from AltLayer. We're building a RAS service, but also well known for our restake roller framework that brings restaking to rollups.
All right, there we go. Wait, who are you? Who am I? I am Pim. I'm an investor at Maven 11. Yeah, that's about it. Nice to see you. Lovely to meet you as well. So maybe to get started, I think earlier this year, I was on a panel with Raza actually, and I posed him this question as well. And I'm curious whether maybe the scroll answers changed, but also what you guys' answers are. The industry has seen a ton of different ways in which we can scale blockchains. People very strongly differ of opinion, and I guess there will be some differences of opinion here. But so just to set the stage, what do you guys, and maybe we can just go left to right, what do you think is the correct way of scaling blockchains? And maybe also what are some of the currently unsolved problems that are blocking us from doing so at this point?
Yeah, I guess as the first person, I have the privilege to talk about fragmentation. So I work for a school. A school is a ZK rollup, and the promise of rollups are, scaling. And that fundamentally, the problem with that promise is on a single chain with a single sequencer, your throughput is fundamentally limited, regardless of how much optimization you do, how perfect you manage the, state or stuff like that. When you have an app that scales like to billions, like Facebook level scale, you need many servers. That's obvious. Whatever solution we want, it requires for execution. And the obvious one, or the one that at least Ethereum community broadly talks about, is sharding execution through many rollups. Now, the problem is now we have to solve fragmentation because we have a lot of independent execution environments. And what we currently working on and thinking about is solving the problem of settlement delay on L1. And through that, solve the fragmentation. The problem concretely, if one rollup wants to talk to another rollup today, it has to create a message or initiate a super transaction. This message has to be settled on L1 first, then the second rollup can see that message and consume it. And the settlement on Ethereum takes a lot of time. You have to wait for the ZK proof and a lot longer for the optimistic proof mechanism to kick in. And after that, you have to wait for L1 to finalize that proof. And that's 12 minutes or so. It's not a nice user experience, and it's far away from synchronous composability that you experience on one chain. So one class of solutions is to provide some middle ground, somebody in between, some sort of like execution pre-confirmation or some sort of insurance for this message that goes like this. Hey, chain B, a message insured by, 1,000 ETH or something, and please consume me. And it would be then the job of these chains to negotiate with each other, decide who they want to compose with faster than L1 settlement rate, what kind of guarantees is enough for them, and so on and so forth. And if you think about it, it's all about creating a spectrum of economic security rather than a binary of economic security. That is, today, you could either wait for L1 settlement or not. But in the future, you could have multiple different levels of settlement. And maybe if I want to buy a coffee, a little bit of guarantee is enough. But if I want to buy an expensive house in Vancouver, I have to wait maybe 10 minutes, and that's okay.
Yeah. Thinking while you were saying that, I was thinking what I was going to talk about, because I think you did a good job basically pitching the thesis behind our company, which is horizontal scalability. I won't go too far into that. I think one thing I'll add is that I think is fairly underappreciated in the ETH space is that now that we have Ethereum as this amazing settlement layer and all that means to do settlement on Ethereum, whether that's optimistic or ZK, I had a bunch of great folks on the last panel here that are all working on solutions. You can now basically do anything you want on Ethereum. And so I think not only will Ethereum scale compute horizontally, we'll also scale new execution environments. So people who build, if you're building like a new smart contract language or something right now, it's best to build that as a rollup on Ethereum, even if it's not EVM, than trying to also figure out like consensus and getting a bunch of nodes to run your blockchain, et cetera. On the fragmentation interoperability point, I agree. That's like the number one problem in the space. The most important thing that we see is that an interoperability solution, it needs to do a good job at unifying as much of the Ethereum ecosystem as possible. What a lot of different teams right now are working on, and they're working on very siloed solutions. And we think that makes a lot of sense for them to do. But then you've only solved the problem halfway, right? Instead of 100 different rollups, you have 12 different silos or whatever. And so building like strong universal solutions, definitely number one problem.
Yeah, I think you put it really well. I'm going to try to abstract your answer to one degree higher because you asked what is the correct way. And I think really when you look at all of these solutions, they're very similar once you get to a certain level of abstraction. And then you can confidently say, okay, this is correct. But then once we start talking about nuance, it's just a function of trade-offs. So the abstraction that I think is correct is local execution, global synchronization. Essentially the world that we have in Ethereum land with the rollup-centric roadmap. We have many sort of local state roots that are being processed and executed at once. And then there's hopefully, to the fragmentation problem that they're discussing, some synchronization globally at some point, right? Where all of these local state roots can be functionally one.
I would like to go a step back because I feel like before Ethereum, of course, we had Bitcoin and the idea was to build a proper peer-to-peer cash in some way, right? I think we are nowhere close to doing anything P2P. What I mean by truly P2P is where I don't want to get any other third-party network involved in whatsoever. I want to actually transact with you, and that's it. And I don't think we are there. And I feel like we are going forward in a certain direction because we feel like ZK is the end game. It is, in my opinion, it's the means to the end game. It's not the end game, in my opinion. And if you said the way blockchains have evolved over time, right, you have like initial Ethereum network or other POS network where the chain is basically monolithic, it does everything. And you send transactions, they're all verified by all the network nodes in the network. Now we are building systems where, as mentioned earlier, you have a roll-up that does execution, and then you have this network that verifies things. So you still need a decentralized network to verify things, but you can have one single party producing proofs. And now we're talking about client-side proof generation or those sort of things where client generates the proof. You don't need a third-party prover to do it. But we're not talking about who actually verifies this proof. Even in this new model, you still have this network of nodes that are verifying. You still need that. It's still not truly P2P. I think what next should happen at some point is where I prove to you that what I'm saying is actually valid or my transaction is valid without having some sort of a third-party network to actually do it for you. And I don't think we are there yet. And until we're there, we won't have neither peer-to-peer payment, neither peer-to-peer global smart contract platform to think. So I think when people say ZK is the end game, in my opinion, ZK is a means to that end because when you prove something, you want that ZK proof to be done because it's much more easier to verify. Yes, you need faster proof generation. That's also important, but there has to be a peer-to-peer element. Otherwise, you'll always have some network that will always be a bottleneck for something, either for proof verification or something of some kind, or DA or whatever. So I don't think we are there yet, and I feel like we are going in a direction, but we sometimes have to come back and see, okay, what did we wanted to achieve in the first place, and we are far away from that.
Can I add a comment on that?
Yeah, both of you. Go ahead.
I feel like it strays a little bit from the original question, but I want to add my personal take on the subject because I feel like what ZK did, it removes one of the functionalities that we needed blockchain for. So why we needed blockchain? We needed blockchain to, like, through re-execution, have guarantee about correctness of execution, but also we need blockchain for equivocation prevention. That is, suppose we have some shared estates, the price of Uniswap for a certain pool, or like how much this person has USDC and so on and so forth. These shared estates can't fundamentally be verified on an individual level. You have to have the shared estate globally. That's why, unfortunately, that future is impossible unless we have these one-time programs and quantum computers, and that's too far in the...
I'm going to one-time programs, exactly. So I think, so the answer is no, it is possible. It is possible. Yes, you make certain assumptions, but it's possible. So they're saying that, no, it's not possible. That's what he literally mentioned, that one-time programs are one way of doing it. So it is possible. Yes, there are challenges. There are assumptions that you're making. But with things like one-time programs, you actually can build such a system.
Right. You wanted to?
I was going to ask that same question. But that's fair.
That is a fair answer.
Maybe one of the things that stood out was, Matt, you mentioned you can already do everything on Ethereum. And I think the distinction, Avi, that you made between like local and global, I think one of the recent big discussions that was mostly triggered, I think, feel by like Solana essentially, has been around the Ethereum rollup-centric roadmap. And is this still the way we should scale Ethereum in the short term? Let's leave the quantum computing aside, maybe. Would you say there's any validity to essentially the critiques that have been leveraged against Ethereum's current rollup-centric roadmap? And maybe asking the question in a different way, is there anything Ethereum should learn from a Solana, or should Solana learn from the Ethereum scaling roadmap?
Yeah, I think that I think both sides definitely need to take the critiques into account. Like, I think Solana, like there are members of the Ethereum community that I think don't pay Solana like any attention. And I think we've seen the danger of that, which is basically like being in your own echo chamber, not really trying to learn. And Solana has done a really good job, right? Like, they've been able to scale a blockchain, I think, to a point far greater than a lot of people would have assumed a blockchain could scale through highly opinionated design, including at the execution level. I think definitely a lot of the critiques are valid. I think one thing that a lot of Solana boosters, especially ones that aren't engineers by trade, miss is just the path dependence that Ethereum came to a lot of these design decisions from. So if you can ask this question, was the rollup-centric roadmap the best way to scale Ethereum? Well, if we go back to when we founded the company, our company back in like early 2022 and late 2021, like everything actually felt like it was just totally broken and people were all leaving Ethereum. If you were building any app with, any sort of large scale vision, maybe you would do it on Polygon, right? Maybe you'd go to Solana, maybe you'd go to Avalanche, Phantom, right? There's like a whole host of other solutions, but like those had basically no connection to Ethereum outside of maybe using the same execution client. And so from that perspective, coming to rollups as the way to scale Ethereum made a lot of sense. I think any sort of ground up redesign of execution or the VM was basically impossible at that point. So, from a first principles perspective, maybe a lot of things could have been done differently, but I think rollups were the best way forward, based on like, the original design decisions that were made way back, in like the early 2010s.
Yeah, I think the path dependent point is like really important. And Ethereum, I think, was like way ahead of its time. There's that Dune meme where it's like our plans are measured in centuries or whatever. And I think Ethereum like really embodies that in a good way. In 2015, they started talking about execution sharding, and then it was state channels, and then it was plasma, and then it was rollups, right? And there was always this very consistent view that you needed to scale horizontally, right? Your company's philosophy or core thesis. And that's something very fundamental, just distributed systems, that if you want to do something at global scale, if you want to be a world computer, if you want to unbank the unbanked, if you want to build finance, money markets at that scale, you need to do it over as many machines as you possibly can. And so that has been like very consistent. I think an interesting question is like, where maybe on the Ethereum roadmap did we diverge from the optimal path, right? And have we diverged from the optimal path? I think in retrospect, if you look at the differences between execution sharding and rollups, they're very similar, especially when you take the perspective of what does Ethereum L1 view? It's just these incoming data, some proofs, and you have these things that are computing outside of the protocol. But with execution sharding, there was control. And there was actually an ability for Ethereum to maintain control over development and ensure that these shards are synchronizing across one another. And that's effectively what we're trying to do right now in the layer 2 ecosystem, is to solve this fragmentation problem by implementing sort of new middle layers like AltLayers or shared sequencers, introducing new sort of interop standards for cross rollup talk. And I think it begs the question, why haven't we revisited sharding as a viable solution or body of research to scale Ethereum? Right? And that's very core to what we do at Nil with ZK sharding. And I think one other thing, Solana, I think Ethereum can definitely learn from just Solana's culture, which might like trigger some people, but there's a culture in Solana to just fuck around and find out. And I think that's something that Ethereum, especially layer twos, have the affordance to do and should, because you're not dealing with the base layer that's securing $300 billion of assets. You're just dealing with much smaller ecosystems that can be more innovative, and you should. Yeah. If you want to go, no?
I can go next.
No, you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, about Solana and Ethereum, that's a topic that had been debated so much. I feel like I can't add anything to the discussion, but one thing that I want to emphasize is fundamentally Ethereum is different. And because say you're from Iran, I'm originally from Iran, you're sanctioned from any financial instrument, anything serious financially anywhere around the world. But still today, I will send my parents money over Ethereum. And I'm very confident 10 years from now, I still can do it. Hopefully, if builders don't centralize further. But on Solana, I feel like the guarantees are much weaker. And as soon as these technologies get a little bit more serious, or regulators get a little bit more serious, if you have one hostile regulator in the room, it's not clear if Solana is going to allow my transactions anymore or not. And what I'm trying to say is Ethereum decentralization is just on a vastly different level. And it has a strong censorship resistant guarantee, a strong property rights, and so on and so forth. And what's very great about the rollup roadmap is you have a very nice abstraction between these two layers. The Ethereum L1 knows what it is about. It's about providing a strong censorship resistance, a strong decentralization, something that can't be broken in any case. And rollups are taking a totally different approach. We want to provide maximum optimization, provide pre-confirmation, do all those crazy pre-compiles and innovation and so on and so forth. It's a very clean separation of tasks. And it keeps what's important inside Ethereum. And that's like why we need blockchains in the first place, sovereignty, these strong guarantees. And Solana can never have that with its current design.
Yeah, that I definitely see, right? Like they are fundamentally different goals, I think, that they are working towards. At the same time, the arguments you mentioned for Ethereum L1 do not necessarily apply to ETH L2s, right? The single centralized sequencer is not the censorship resistant bastion that you would need to send money remittances to relatives in Iran, right? So how do you square that?
Yeah, obviously you guys all know about forced transactions on L2s, and many L2s currently support forced transactions. For instance, on Escrow, we don't support forced transactions today, but with the next upgrade we will do. And the reason is just technical. The reason is like there could be a transaction that's forced but overflows the circuits, like just a technical issue that will be solved soon with the rise of ZK VMs and so on. But like many major rollups today support that, such as like Optimism and Arbitrum. So you have forced transactions. It's obviously less than ideal because like it has a long delay. And for instance, if you want to use it for something like a Oracle updating the price, if sequencer is malicious, it can block the transaction and some liquidations don't happen and so on and so forth. So it's definitely, there is definitely room to improve. And we are looking into that too. But what's important is in the optimal case, in the happy path, you are able to provide very nice service competing with Web2 kind of service. But in the critical scenario, in the catastrophic event that somebody is really trying to mess with people, there is always Ethereum L1 there. You could withdraw your money there because the securities of rollup construction guarantees that you can always do that and so on and so forth. So again, I feel like Solana got the blockchain thing a little bit wrong. And they are doing something, they are kind of doing something that is not aligned with the philosophies that this space is about, maybe. But that's just my personal opinion.
If I may add one point to this Solana and Ethereum discussion, I think Ethereum hasn't gone full degen on rollup roadmap, in my opinion. What I mean, and by the way, this is something that Vitalik wrote very recently, which I completely agree with. And his thought was that Ethereum should itself become a rollup on something which is like a meta Ethereum on the line. And what will basically would look is you have, I don't know, a RISC-V system and you have a proof verification setting on, and that's all that is. And everything basically becomes a rollup. And Ethereum itself, the way you use it today, itself becomes a rollup that is attached to the base chain, which is meta Ethereum, whatever you call it. So I think Ethereum and Solana will keep diverging more and more. And if you're hoping that you will see the same architecture, that's not happening, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think just one observation in listening to you speak is Solana is really optimized for the average, and Ethereum is optimized for sort of worst case scenario, right? And I think in some ways, like that's the appropriate way to view their progress, because if you take that perspective, they're not really good reference points for one another. You might as well be comparing coin, the asset, to ETH, the asset, right? They're just very optimizing for fundamentally very different things.
I think these are very fair points. Then also that Solana will end up monetizing itself at some point, or I think these will be fundamentally different value propositions moving forward.
Solana will what?
Like modularizing in a way.
I think they have extensions.
Work extensions.
Yeah. So I guess it's already happening. I think Solana has a really good chance at doing the whole like NASDAQ on chain thing. And yeah, I think they'll keep like pushing down like that path, and I think they'll hit pretty close to it. If they want to do something much more robust, much more comprehensive, do things at a much larger scale where you're not, say, just optimizing for one incredibly high performant global application, but many at once, and you're really trying to build a global financial system, not just a single financial application, you will inevitably hit the limits of what your hardware can do, and you will have to modularize or go to different layers. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people give shit to Solana people saying we are not rollups, we are network extensions. But if you think about it, you can see why they mean in that specific way, even though technically speaking is the same thing. And I think the point comes from the fact that if you look at an Ethereum world, most rollups are the same, right? They all have the same runtime. They all do the same exact thing. When people come with rollups, they say, hey, we want to build an app-specific rollup, but it's actually, in 99% of the cases, they look like Arbitrum. They're very much similar to Arbitrum. They're very much similar to Base. So I think the beef comes from the fact that, or the thinking or the idea of network extensions comes from the fact that they feel like, okay, it's all the same thing. In your rollup world, there's no difference between Arbitrum, Optimism, and from a practical sense of perspective. Yeah, when you, for example, bring SVM and things like that, then it looks okay. Now it's slightly different because now you have a different runtime at least. So I think I see their point of view, even though the framing may not be right, but I see the point of view when you say that, okay, we don't want modularity, we don't want rollups, we want network extension, because what they mean by this is things that extend what Ethereum can do or the base layer can do, and not exactly, okay, we have 5 copies of Arbitrum running around. That's, I think, what they mean by this, which I understand, I get it.
I want to disagree with you on multiple levels. One is like you can do on rollups stuff, even if there are EVM rollups, like type 1 EVM rollups, like a scroll that like identical on Ethereum, whatever you can do on Ethereum, you can do on a scroll. You can do things on a scroll that you can't do on Ethereum. Why? Because you can do cheaper. And
there's not a point. You can do cheaper. That's not like it's doing differently.
It is. You can't play a game on Ethereum when the fees are so high, but you can do on rollup. But that's not my main point. There is also all sort of experimentation like SVM as a rollup, I don't know, Arbitrum, Stylus, and so on and so forth. But that's again not my point. I want to talk about something very important that kind of is in agreement in what you said. That is what we see with all these rollup SDKs and aggregation layers and rollup clusters and so on and so forth. Mostly with rollup clusters is that these clusters that are forming are very homogeneous.
Correct.
And they are sharing almost everything. If you go to our OP superchain, you need to share governance, you need to share your stack, you need to share your proof system. And that gives them ability to make assumptions about each other and have maybe a better interop in the future when they ship that. But what is missing is one big point about the rollup-centric roadmap is people can experiment, people can specialize. To give you an example, maybe you want a gaming app, and you don't care about finalization on L1, you can wait a day and generate one proof for the whole day and then settle, right? But then again, you want very fast block time because your users on the game want to see fast update. Oh, this is the newest state of the game. On the other way of the spectrum, maybe for a financial app or I don't know, another kind of app, you want fast finalization and you're okay with a slower block time. There are fundamentally different ways to configure your rollup. It could be execution environment. It could be this, hyperparameters like this. And then many of these platforms are not designed to offer that in a nice way. For instance, if an OP superchain rollup wants to add a precompile and change its execution environment, it has to go through the governance, because it needs to change the proof system. What we are doing in Scroll, and I'm shamelessly advertising for our new product, we recently announced a Scroll SDK, which basically is the same as a Stack and Arbitrum, Orbit, and so on and so forth, with the caveat. And we want to give modular and fine-grade the users of this SDK to opt into any service they want. They want shared governance, but they don't want interrupt. That's cool. They want to couple their execution environment, but faster block time. That's cool. We're still in the process of figuring out how it should be done. And it's a complex thing because you risk building 100 different versions of your own stack because maybe you can't put these different features in compartment that can compose if you do it wrong. So it's technically a harder task. That's why many people haven't done it, but that's what we try to do with a Scroll SDK. And I also want to emphasize again that cheaper is important.
Look, we can debate on that, but I agree with what you're saying, which is I think what has happened is when you move execution out, you have a lot of flexibility, right? The idea was that you could build different kind of runtimes. We have seen that through Stylus. We have seen that some of the other new runtimes being built. But if you look at the majority, there's this thing that you can do and there's thing that is being done, right? And what I'm saying that there's a difference between that. And if you're looking for all intents and purposes, if you look at what's actually being done, and you mentioned that it is very homogeneous. Most chains are very homogeneous for good reasons, which is they want to make things homogeneous so that you could have interop. And that's a requirement in many ways. Yes, you could decide, OP stack is completely open for anyone to fork and do whatever they want with it, right? And they could. But given the practicalities, given the nature of business interests and the likes and whatnot, the ecosystem is going in a direction where things look more or less the same with few outliers in some sense, like Stylus and others.
Maybe I'll jump in here. I'll take the moderate position between you two. I think that you're definitely correct. And I think a lot of that was just due to the fact it's more coming from like the economic incentives and what people in the space wanted than anything like more real than that. Like for a long time, like everyone was like, the mission is build better Ethereum, faster Ethereum, cheaper Ethereum. That's like settling on Ethereum. And like EVM equivalence, not just compatibility, but like strict equivalence was really strongly prized. You mentioned Stylus. I think Arbitrum did a really bold thing. I guess no pun intended. In basically, they're the number one rollup at TVL. They still are. They were EVM equivalent. And then now they adopted a multi-VM setup that would break compatibility with like all sorts of Ethereum tooling. And I think that's what we're seeing. We talk to a bunch of rollup builders every day. That sort of stuff is really opening up the floodgates. And I think as well, the major blocker for app chains is really, it's not that they don't want to build highly optimized setups for their chains. It's just a question of like tooling, right? It's much easier for them to mostly operate, at the smart contract level than like write their own precompiles. Stylus is a nice in-between there. But I think as more people see what can be done with rollups, like the tooling for making execution client changes, et cetera, will improve. The fact that we now have like really amazing general purpose, like ZK provers will enable that. And so I think like the space will look a lot more different 5 years from now than it is right now, but it's a totally valid criticism, the space currently.
I think one more thing.
Go ahead.
I think there is a fundamental problem with app chains, and that's the need for shared infrastructure. Like you alluded to it, but just to expand on it a little bit, like if you're operating a rollup, especially a ZK rollup, you're taking a lot of cost. Like you need to make proofs regardless of transactions are coming or not. You need to run the sequencer. You need Etherscan equivalent and indexer services. You need integration with centralized exchanges and so on and so forth. And all of this costs a lot of money. And one thing that's missing in our industry is like platforms for shared infrastructure. Things such as shared blob submission, shared proof creation, like Elastic backend for like proof generation, or shared proof verification. And we hear people talking about that. And I'm hopeful like maybe a year from now, we have a lot of infrastructure for shared infrastructure. and then it becomes more feasible.
Totally. I think it's a matter of time. Like there are a lot of businesses right now that make all their money off of the top 5 chains, right? And like they huge contracts, big sales teams, right? They cost millions of dollars per year. And I think those companies are just not well set up for a world where there are like a bunch of chains. But in the Web2 world, right? You need all this other shared infrastructure as well. You need VPSs, you need databases, you need analytics, communication, et cetera. And like all those companies have figured out business models where they can sell that software on a piecemeal basis at low cost or scaling with usage. And I think we're seeing a lot of teams now disrupting a lot of these legacy teams offering similar services.
Just looking at the time here. Are we out? All right, there we go. What is your spicy take when it comes to L2s? Does anybody want to say something controversial?
I had a question for the panel because we're talking a lot about app chains and like app specific rollups as if it's like an inevitability that we're just going to live in this universe of thousands, millions of rollups. And it sounds like the core premise here is that applications want to customize their execution environment or they want to customize block times. But in a world where you have a very fast, cheap, reliable blockchain, what are the customizations that are worth running your own infrastructure and going out and building your own app chain?
Ordering, transaction ordering, value extraction.
And then what if we live in a world with rollup boost and multi-concurrent proposer?
Like MCP in an L1?
Where an application is able to essentially have some ordering rights in sequencing orders from their application. We have some guarantees around competitive priority fee markets. So you're able to capture MEV at the application layer, of course, within your vertical, right? Cross app MEV is maybe off to the validators. And again, you have abundant block space. It's cheap, it's reliable, it's fast. It really comes down to this question of customization, right? And what are those customizations that you would want to make that would make it worthwhile to run your own app chain?
Very good question. And I think it can be a hot take about the current state of the rollups because everybody is talking about multi-chain and interop between those chains, but nobody is talking about the other end of the spectrum that is providing services on a rollup that could reduce the incentive for spinning up your own app chain, such as like revenue sharing, I don't know, providing some sort of guarantees about sequencing, let them express what are their preferences and I don't know, run the sequencer inside the TEE and guarantee that those preferences are met, or you can do it in many different ways. And there are actually people working on that. There is this RIP gas to eat, for instance, that's about letting an application to consume arbitrary amount of gas and get ETH in return. You allow in a smart contract to charge users some money through gas, and they can get a share of the gas. And there is ideas such as MIF tax that you mentioned. And so we are getting there, but like it's not part of the mainstream discussion. And probably that's something that would be much more valuable than standalone rollups, especially today that we don't have this shared infrastructure for rollups.
This answer may be very controversial, but I think there's always be a reason to launch a chain. There's always going to be a reason to launch a chain.
Because you can get more money or?
Necessarily financially, but more like technically, there's always be a technical reason to launch because whatever feature set the base L1 provides you will always have some requirement that because you is not going to be exhaustive from a feature perspective. You'll always want something else. And that something else will force you to have your own chain. It's the same logic as why do we need another L1? Because you have a different mechanism. You feel that consensus is shit. You want something else. You will feel like, okay, I want to reward people in a certain way who are transacting on my chain that the base layer doesn't provide you natively. And the base layer is very difficult to change. And so what I'm saying that not from economic, of course, economic perspective is something else. There's like economic reasons to or financial reasons to launch your own chain. But there'll always be something, some technical feature that will always be missing because you never can be feature complete that you'd like to have on your chain and you'd launch a chain.
Philosophically, I agree. But I think empirically, you just take a look at Solana, right? Solana does a very good job at servicing many different applications, right? And I think you could call them feature complete for the modern day. Now, you have some extensions that are maybe trying to do some new things, but for the most part, the vast majority of applications
a single layer can be feature complete for your needs?
If I want to build like,
I guess maybe today, can you give me one example, assuming you can do MEV capture, assuming you have fast, reliable block
new
space?
runtime. I don't.
Why would I want a new runtime?
I just want to. Like, if I want
Okay,
to run
fair.
Solidity,
Fair.
because let's say I have a contract on Ethereum. I'm Uniswap. Let's say I'm Uniswap. I have all my infrastructure built in Solidity and EVM, and I want to come on Solana because I feel like there's a huge market. I don't want to lose to Jupe and Radium and the likes and whatnot, and somehow be able to get involved there. How do I do it? There's always going to be some feature that's always been missing, and as a developer, you'd want something built in there. And that's why you would build something that extends that. So
That's not, actually, I'm going to push back, because that's not an argument for technical features. That's an argument for being close to valuable state. Uniswap wants to move from Ethereum to Solana because Solana has a bunch of assets on its chain and users and distribution. It's not because Solana has some sort of core technical feature that it offers Uniswap that improves their user experience.
no, it's not about user experience. It's I'm a developer and I want to write Solidity code. Can I deploy on Solana today? No, I can't. So that's my thing.
There are easier ways to argue that you have always motivation to deploy a chain, and that's what we first started with, vertical execution.
Okay, and this is, I'm going to come back
Solana,
to
by the way, Solana team, there's one project in Solana. I forgot the
Neon.
No,
EVM?
yeah, but
Yeah.
the EVM. There's another project in Solana that's, I think it's a NFT marketplace or gaming something. And they build this, that we also had an idea, a very similar idea, which is they build a rollup that's disposable on Solana. So they spin up a chain and they use it for some gaming thing.
Magic block, I think you mean.
Yes, magic, yes. And they spin up this thing and they run their thing there. And there's every now and then they settle on this because they want to have a disposable system. So here's another feature.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think we're at time.
We're getting heavy signals. I guess thanks everybody for chipping in. It was a good conversation. Thanks everybody for sticking around. And that was it for today, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.